As you can see, the pin tumbler assembly has the cylinder plug itself, which is right in here, and this is the part that rotates. We also have the upper pins and lower pins, which go into each of the holes in the lock assembly. Okay. If we look inside this lock, you'll see some typical parts that we'll see in most locks of the similar kind. If we look inside this lock, we have several parts that we can see clearly. We have the cylinder plug, which is this part here, and that's the part that actually rotates as we put the key in the lock and turn the mechanism. We also have the pins for the lock. There's two sets of pins here. There's actually lower pins, which are down here, and we have the upper pins, which sit on top of them. The springs keep the pins down and keep them from moving around. If we take a closer look at this lock, we can see there's several components that make up the pin. If we take a closer look at this lock, we can see the pin tumbler assembly is made up of several components. One of which is the plug, which is seen here. This is what rotates once you put the key in. We also have the pins, which we have both lower and upper sets of pins. The lower pins you can see are down here. The upper pins sit right on top of them. And then we have the springs that go in on top of the whole assembly. Now, as you can see, there's a parting line between the upper and lower pins. You can see one right here. There's another one here, here, and here. Now, as long as those part lines are either below or above the plug will not be able to rotate because the pins are going to keep it from rotating. As long as there's a pin down in the hole and it's across the shear line, the plug won't rotate. So that's why if we put a key in and try to turn it, or try to turn it without a key, nothing's going to happen. Now let's take a look at what happens when you actually insert a key. When we put the key in the lock, you can see that it starts moving those pins based on the cuts of the key. So as it moves it in, moves the key in and out, you can see those positioning of the pins changes. You know, it goes up and down based on your cuts of your key. So based on the cut of the key itself will determine what the height of each of the pins is going to be. Now, if we put an incorrect key in, what happens is you have a situation where the pins have been moved, but they're still not in line with the shear line. So we still cannot turn the lock because we have the pins that are holding it in place. So as long as we have a pin, as long as we have a key that does not the right code, those pins will never line up properly. As you can see, these pins can move quite a ways, and so it gives you a big variety. As you can see, the pins can move up and down quite a bit, so that gives us quite a variety of different options as far as what the key code could be. Now let's see what's happened. Now let's see what happens when we use the proper side. Now let's see what happens when we put the proper key into the lock. As we insert the key, you can see it moves the pins up and down. Now let's see what happens when the proper key is. Now let's see what happens when the proper key is inserted into the lock. As it goes in, you can see it moving up and down the pins. When we get it all the way in, you can see now that all the pin shear lines are lined up together right here in the top of the plug. So they're all flush with the top of the plug and all the pins are lined up. So once this is the case, then we can basically turn the key and the lock releases.